1948. Now you would think, how would a 12-year-old kid be thinking about politics? Well, in 1948, I used to listen to the radio too. When I wasn't reading newspapers, I had to listen to the radio because there was no television. So the only thing that you had to do, if I was in the store that my dad on, the radio would be on, and I would listen to the radio. The first time I heard a man named Hubert Humphrey was in 1948. He was a mayor of Minneapolis, Minnesota. He came into the Democratic Convention, and he was talking about the upliftment of the black man, about civil rights, and about all of the things that were not being done for the blacks, and how they were being held down, and all of this. And the Democratic Convention was led by, predominantly it was Southerners. They had most. They controlled the Democratic Party, and with it, that became, I think, the turning point where Southerners got out of the Democratic Party. I remember Strom Thurmond. He got out and he started forming a party called Dixiecrat, the Dixiecrat Party. And so the Southerners got out of the Democratic Party and they formed the Dixiecrat Party, and then later went into the Republican Party. But at that time, during the time in the 40s, the Democrats were controlling the segregated states, southern states. But when they started losing the southern state, started losing the party of power, they got out and just formed their own party until they went on. And Strom Thurmond, he was a dedicated racist, segregationist, but behind the scenes, he was going with his maid. He had a child that he fathered and that he recognized as being the father. But he would not stand to see a black man with a white woman. And I remember reading also in the 40s where a black man named Ingram, they called him, in the Jet magazine, it was Evil Eye Ingram. It was in the 40s, 47, 48, in North Carolina or South Carolina. He never came out of his yard, but a white woman was walking down the street, in the country street. She was walking down the street, and she said he looked at her like he wanted to attack her. She went and reported him. Now, she said he never came out of his yard, but he was just looking at her. They came and arrested that man. He went to court, and he spent something like 3 or 4 years in jail. They called him Evil Eye Ingram. Now, you look that one up, too. And then I remember where this young black guy, Emmett Till, that was in the late 40s, where he'd come from, I think it was Chicago, and went down to Mississippi, and he went into the store with his cousin, and he said something smart to a white woman. I don't know what it was. He might have called a baby. He said something smart that she didn't like. And that night, 3 white men came, took him out of his grandmother's house, beat him to a pulp, threw him into the river with the sewing machine tied to him. Now, they know he was beaten to a pulp because the mother, when they had the funeral in Chicago, she had an open casket, open face casket, and they saw his face, how he had been beaten to a pulp. But that was another case of where they didn't want to see any black man saying anything to a white woman, thinking that he was going to do anything with the white woman. That was no go. But like I said, if you find me a black man that's been in this country since 1800, that doesn't have some European blood, bring him to me. They got European blood, and where did that blood come from? It didn't always come from love. It came from whatever the man wanted to do. If he saw a woman he wanted, a black woman, that was just the way it was. He could take it if he wanted. They should bring this series back of Roots. They should bring that series back. They let some of the young people see that series. That was a very educational series, and it was very truthful series. The guy that wrote this, the movie, that wrote the book, Roots, he went to Africa to find out where he had come from. And he went into Liberia. And I was in Liberia about 2 days after he had left. And I was staying in the house where he had stayed with a friend of mine. And the friend told me, yeah, man, this guy, I can't think, Haley. He said, yeah, man, Haley, he's going now, he's going up, he's looking for his roots. He's going up now up to western, more up north, looking for the roots. And he found his roots. And I understand that he found them, as told by the movie, the series. He was listening to Giro, they didn't have written history, but they had people who could tell things about what happened hundreds of years ago, 100 years back, 200 years ago. And they said he was sitting there listening to this man going through all of this. He said, then this guy was captured, and he went out to fish, and we never saw him again. Kumi Kinte. He never saw him again. And this was when he said, Haley, whose family said, who? Kunta Kinte. Hey, say that, read that again. Kunta Kinte, when he was brought into the States, he knew his name was Kunta Kinte, and he always kept that name, and he always, when he had children, he always kept that name. And Haley was a descendant of Kunta Kinte, and he wrote this book, Roots. They should put that back on TV. That was a good series that I saw. But it told a lot about slavery time and how men could take advantage of the black women, and they had a child by a black woman. Well, he was brown, so they wouldn't put him in the field. They wouldn't call him they'd call him a house nigger. He wouldn't be a field nigger. So this is the terms that they would use. It's a good thing that we don't have that stuff now. I finished high school in Chicago. I finished at John Marshall High School on the west side of Chicago. And from there I went into, I spent 2 years at a junior college because at that time my family didn't have quite the funds that they had when they were in Florida. So I was on the downside, on the poor side at this point. But so I went 2 years junior college, Wilson Junior College on the south side of Chicago. Then I went and finished at Roosevelt University. And out of Roosevelt University, I went into the Marine Corps for reserves. And I went in, I stayed 6 months in the reserve, and I was supposed to be doing every year, 2 weeks of reserve training. But I was not enthused about this training anymore. Because when I was in the Marine Corps, I was at Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, and I went into town one time, and out of Camp Lejeune, I couldn't go into a McDonald's. I couldn't go into any restaurant. Black troops could not go into those places to eat. And at the time, they were talking about Vietnam. They were talking about we might have to go to Vietnam. Eisenhower was talking about, mentioned Vietnam. Went to a map, looked for Vietnam, and there was no Vietnam on the map. I said, where's Vietnam? There was nothing but French Indochina. That was all that was on the map, French Indochina. There was no Cambodia or Laos or Vietnam. There was just one big thing, French Indochina. But anyway, I left the Marine Corps and went to work in Washington for the Internal Revenue, and that's where because I had gone to try to get a job with the bank, and that wouldn't work. But I got in with the Internal Revenue because at that time, the Kennedy had just become president, and they started opening up government employment. And I remember when I went into the Internal Revenue, we had a 6-month training program, and there were about 7 of us, 7 blacks out of about 25 students in this class. And the talk around the offices was, look, they're trying to take over. Look at them. That's 7. They got all these black guys coming into the Internal Revenue. Well, there was 7 of us, and one was eliminated. And there was one Japanese guy was eliminated, and the rest of us went in. There was 23 went in, but that's when I was during that time. I went to Paris to see my brother graduate, and from there into Denmark, and that's when I got the calls from my mother telling me, "Hey, they're calling you, come back to work." And when I went back, I could never be satisfied again. I thought I had to go into something overseas. But that's when one time I was on this airplane and I was talking to a gentleman, and he mentioned that he knew people in Foreign Service that we were talking about. And he said, "Yeah." He said, "Give me your number. If I ever hear of anything, I'll give you a call." I said, "Okay." And he called me, and I didn't remember him, didn't know who he was, but he told me, "Yeah, if you go to Vietnam for your first tour." I said, "Yeah, okay." So I took the tour, and I went to Vietnam. It was I got there about 3 months before Tet, 1967. I was there about 3 months before Tet. But I was lucky because there was a Vietnamese man in the office that I would talk to, and I would always call him, what was his name, Mr. I can't think of his name right now, but I would call him Mr. something. He was an older man. He spoke French because he had worked for the French before, but everybody would call him by his name. Jim, give him the thing, whatever. And I would always say, Mr. Somebody. And so for some reason he took a liking to me. And he told me one day, he said, "Look, Tet is coming up." He said, "Stay in, don't go out. Don't go out on the street when Tet starts." I said, "Well, why?" He said, "There's going to be big trouble. There's going to be big trouble. So you just stay in." I said, "I'm thinking about going over from the R&R over to the Philippines." He said, "Go, that's good, go." So I went on R&R to the Philippines, and while I was in the Philippines, Tet broke out. And I came back in as Tet was winding down, and the hotel that I was staying in, next door to it was a building that they were building. Tet had gotten into that building, killed about 4 or 5 people, and there was one guy with USAID, thought he was going to be a hero or something, and he went into the building with the weapon, and he got killed in the building. But so I was happy that I wasn't there in Vietnam at Tet.